Welcome back to the Pirate Republic. This is an audiobook presentation of Pirates of the Wild West, the first novel in the Storm of Time series, released one chapter at a time.
In the last chapter, our pirates began to come to terms with the fact that they were no longer in Nassau, nor were they in 1718. This new place, San Francisco, found them in a saloon called the Paris, meeting new characters. A drunken Jack Rackham picked a fight with an outlaw named Jesse, and Bonnie and the rest of the pirates, along with most of the patrons of the saloon, went outside to watch the duel that was about to take place between this pirate and the outlaw. This is Chapter 5, Dead Eyes.
Chapter 5, Dead Eyes. Jack Rackham walked purposefully out onto the muddy street and stood in the center as several men on horseback rode by, and a cold rain lightly drizzled. There were several bystanders that stopped to watch as Jack pulled out one of his pistols to check the load. Behind him, the man named Jesse, that he had challenged to a duel, emerged from the bar, followed by his cowboys. Anne and her fellow pirates filed out to stand along the wooden sidewalk. Jack watched out of the corner of his eye as the three men with Jesse crossed to the opposite side of the street from the Paris saloon. They stood silently, while Anne and several pirates yelled words of encouragement to Jack. "Put a bullet in his belly, Jack," Anne called. Philip Albert stood next to Thatch and the gathering of pirates, along with Colette, and pulled a cigarette from a silver case. He glanced at Colette, and she raised an eyebrow at him and nodded to the case. Philip sighed and took another sweet-smelling cigarette from the ornate case and handed it to her. He struck a match and held the flame cupped in his hand while she leaned forward to light her smoke. Colette noticed Thatch watching the ritual. She took in a deep drag and slowly expelled the smoke. "What is that you use to make the flame?" Thatch asked the little man. Philip stared at him, then handed over a small box that held the matchsticks. Thatch slid the lid open and picked out one of the thin wooden sticks with a round tip coated in something he couldn't identify. He held it to his nose and smelled the tip. "Antimony sulfide, potassium chlorate, and gum arabic mixed to a paste. Then you see this here strip?" Philip pointed to the dark yellow side of the box. Thatch sniffed that as well and made a cringing face. "Sulfur. You strike the tip of the matchstick and the friction will ignite the wood." Thatch closed the lid of the small box and struck the match tip across the sulfur. It sparked with a bit of black smoke, but no flame ignited. He looked at Philip, who nodded his head in encouragement. Thatch tried again with success, as the small stick now had a flame glowing from it. Thatch smiled at it and held it to his face. Philip pulled another cigarette and held it out to Thatch. "Smoke?" Philip asked. Thatch took the cigarette with a grunt and held it to his lips and lit it. He took a long drag and was immediately thankful for the stimulating jolt he received. He blew out a cloud of smoke and handed the little man back his box of matches. "That is excellent," Thatch said. "Yes." Philip took a drag from his own cigarette, then said, "I'm sorry about your man there." Philip nodded toward Rackham, adjusting his pistol in the street. "No need for sympathy. Rackham is a seasoned fighter, very quick with the pistol as well as the sword," Thatch said with a bit of bravado. He then sized up the man calmly waiting on Rackham. The man showed no fear and had the eyes of a predator underneath the brim of his unusual hat. A bit of a smirk lay on his face, like he was enjoying this game of waiting for the violence. Thatch turned to Philip and Colette. "Is that man known to you? He seems dressed as a farmer or horseman." Colette answered without looking at Thatch. "Not a farmer. That is none other than Jesse James, the leader of the James gang. His brother Frank stands over there. Not sure who the other two men are." "Cole and Jim Younger," said Philip, "the other half of the thieving bank robber gang. Not that I'm bearing judgment on any man's choice of livelihood." Thatch chuckled. "So they are pirates as well." "Something like that," said Philip. "What is it that you do?" Thatch asked the little man. "I am a scientist. I have been educated in many disciplines, but currently earn a living in the chemistry of combustibles." Thatch looked questioningly at Philip. "Things that go boom. Thatch smiled in acknowledgement. A handy man to have around. He watched the eyes of the cowboys as they took in the crowd. They seemed to be sizing up everyone gathered, looking for intent, looking for potential trouble, looking for targets. The man, Jesse, who was about to duel Rackham, was staring at Anne Bonny. He had one eye that wandered a bit from the other. His manner was exceedingly calm in the face of possible death. The man's attention was more absorbed presently in the red-headed pirate woman than the scoundrel pirate standing across from him with deadly intent. Jesse James' confidence was exhibited for all to see. Thatch took another drag on the paper cigarette. In that case, this should be interesting. Jack Rackham finished inspecting his flintlock to make sure his powder and paper were dry and ready to be fired. Satisfied that his weapon was in good working order, he turned to his pirate friends standing under the overhang of the Paris, waiting for his duel to commence. He looked directly at Anne and gave her a smile of confidence. Jack nodded to Anne and turned, pistol in his hand, held down at his thigh to face the calm yet intensely focused cowboy. Jesse's pistol was still holstered, and the man stood at an angle with his long coat moved aside away from the hip that held the gun. He was making himself a smaller target for Jack to hit. Fat chance, thought Jack, as the man was the size of Charles Vane, and at 15 paces it would be difficult for Jack to miss. The cowboy had the hint of a smile which antagonized Jack further. "Say when," Jesse said. "The lady shall signal," Jack replied and glanced at Anne. "The lady?" asked Jesse. Anne knew that Jack wanted her to signal the start of the duel by dropping a handkerchief. She quickly searched her person, but finding none, she turned to Mary. Mary removed a scarf that held her hair under her hat and handed it to Anne. Anne took the maroon cloth and stepped forward with it raised high. Jesse watched with curiosity and turned toward his brother, who just shrugged. Jesse refocused on the ornately dressed man in front of him, holding an ancient flintlock pistol at his side. A strange lot, this crew was. They all carried similar weapons with cutlasses and knives strapped to their bodies like the pirates of old. His brother Frank and Cole and Jim Younger had ridden with him into San Francisco on a hunch that the banks in this city would be flowing with gold as the local mines continued to produce. They had spent a few months in Arizona and Nevada robbing stagecoaches and trains, but the Pinkerton National Detective Agency was closing in on them. The gang had mostly split up for the time being. Several made their way to Mexico, and others headed back to Missouri to lie low. The four of them had been in town a few days and had found that the Wells Fargo Bank was employing more heavily armed agents than they had in the past. Jim Younger kept reminding Jesse to be patient, but that was not in Jesse's nature. He was struggling with his desire to brazenly march into one of the banks, guns blazing, and take all they could carry. This pompous, coiffed little pirate, dressed in a flowing shirt that looked like he stole it from a woman's wardrobe, was just what he needed to satisfy the impulsive rage he was feeling inside by waiting. Since he became a bushwhacker during the Civil War, he hadn't gone more than a few days without inflicting violence in some form or another. He watched out of the corner of his eye how the rest of the pirates sized him up, and he wondered if any of them would pull their old flintlock pistols after he was done with this wretch. But Jesse knew that his brother and the Youngers had his back, so he calmly waited for the Irish redhead to drop her sash. Anne attempted to will all her strength and fortitude into Jack as she held the handkerchief between her thumb and finger. She gave Jack a wink and then let it fall. Bam, bam, bam. Edward Thatch watched Anne Bonny drop the cloth from her hand. Jack Rackham confidently started to raise his pistol toward the cowboy with a sneer on his lip. 3 shots had rung out in the blink of an eye, and smoke was wafting from the cowboy's pistol. The man had pulled his gun from his holster faster than Thatch would have thought possible. It was like a blur of violence, a lightning strike of death. 3 shots almost at once. Thatch stared in disbelief as Jack Rackham's gun arm was slowly dropping, having never made it level with his opponent's chest. Jack stared down at the 3 red circles growing upon his shirt and stumbled back a step. He fell first to his knees and locked eyes for a moment with Anne, giving her a weak smile that faded as he fell face down into the muddy street. Thatch watched as the cowboy turned to the crowd, looking for anyone with fight in them. Not seeing any, he spun the pistol on his finger and replaced it with a flourish back in its holster. Thatch's eyes never left the pistol. Multiple rounds, so quick, so easy. He wanted one of those. He wanted several. Anne watched as Jack fell. Her heart stopped beating. She was sure of it. She couldn't breathe, scream, or move. The cowboy looked at her, a hint of a smile on his lips. His hand went to his hat, and he tipped it to her. Rainwater splashed off the brim, and he strode across the street to join his friends. The 4 cowboys then casually walked off. Several onlookers wandered off too now that the drama was over. Some made their way back into the saloon. Anne slowly found the use of her legs, and she stumbled, trembling, to the fallen Jack Rackham. She turned him over and used her sleeve to wipe the mud and dirt from his beautiful face. His dark eyes that she had gazed into so many nights were dull and lifeless. Her tears mixed with the rain fell onto Jack's face, washing away streaks of dirt. She gently closed his lids to protect them from the mud and rain. Then she buried her face in Jack's neck and cried like she never had before. Hornigold put his hand on his pistol after Jessie started walking away. Jennings gripped his arm, stopping him from pulling the weapon out. "Fair duel, one that our Calico Jack initiated," Jennings said. Hornigold steadied his hand and let it drop. He approached the sobbing Anne Bonny and stood over her and the body of Jack Rackham. Jennings and the rest of the pirates surrounded the grieving woman. Mary knelt and put her hand on Anne's shoulder. She looked up at her friend and wiped her eyes. "I want to bury him at sea. It's where he ruled," she said. "Yes, dear, we will." The rain was continuing to fall, and they were all getting soaked once again. "Caesar, carry our brother to the skiff and help Miss Bonny deliver him to the deep," Thatch said. Black Caesar nodded and gently picked up Jack's body. He led the way for Anne, Mary, and Hornigold as they walked back toward the docks. "You're not going?" Charlotte de Barry asked Thatch. "I've not the stomach for such ceremonies," Thatch said. Charlotte looked at Charles Vane and Jennings. Jennings shook his head. "I never much cared for the man. Spearheaded a mutiny on my ship when he was just a whelp. Let him rot." Vane spit. Charlotte turned from the remaining men and followed the small funeral procession on its journey to bury one of the most colorful and famous pirates in the dark waters of the San Francisco Bay. Vane, Thatch, and Jennings ordered drinks at the bar. The crowd had settled in at the late hour of the night. Many had left to wander to their homes or camps in the drizzling, chilly rain. Still, there were those that gambled at a single poker table, ordered drinks from the bar or from the pretty waiter girls that made their rounds to the half-dozen occupied tables. The Paris was one of the several establishments that would continue to serve its patrons until the dawn of the new day. The man was fast with the pistol, Vane said to no one in particular. Thatch's eyes were on a young blonde serving waitress as she waited to pick up drinks at the end of the bar. Her eyes danced, and she gave a coy smile to Thatch before returning to her duties. "How many shots you think that weapon holds?" Vane continued. "6," the big native said as he passed them by with a bottle and glasses in his hands. The man didn't look at the pirates, and Thatch was surprised that it was he who gave an answer to the question. It meant that their conversation was being noted by the imposing barkeep. "6?" Vane said after downing his glass. "No need to carry 6 guns when one can kill 6 men with one?" "Aye, what a future we've landed in," said Thatch. Jennings gave a snort of disgust. "Not very sporting to have so many rounds at your disposal. Only, you thinks of killing as a sport, Jennings. The rest of us do it for necessity or survival." "Don't test me, Thatch. You have spent a lifetime killing and marauding the innocent. Don't act as though you are above the rest of us and some sort of modern-day Robin Hood. Your crimes of murder and debauchery are known far and wide." "Harumph, merely exaggerations and suppositions. I am but a misunderstood pussycat, Henry," Thatch said with a toothy grin. "I would have been happy to take the king's pardon and live a peaceful life," Jennings snarled. "But you and you," he pointed at Vane, "you two wanted to continue harassing and pirating until the king had no other choice but to bring down Woodes Rogers on us." Thatch looked at Vane, who had a worried look on his face. He knew that Vane was under Henry Jennings's thumb, even though Vane also wanted to continue piracy to build his fortune. These two had been hand in hand for years, Jennings bringing his brains and influence to help Vane then being the blunt end of the hammer for Jennings to wield when necessary. Thatch supposed that Vane was a tool that would eventually be discarded by Jennings when it was broken or no longer useful. Jennings had been pressuring the pirates for months to limit their targets to small merchants, Spanish, French, and Dutch ships, but the heavily loaded British merchant ships were far too tempting, even to Vane. You could have signed the pardon and sailed back to your Bermuda. What did you need our consent for? Thatch growled. Jennings looked away. Vane stared at the back of Jennings' head, confused. The silence continued for a moment. Then Thatch smiled. I see. Conditions of the deal. What? What deal? Vane asked. Jennings continued his silence, taking a sip of his drink. Vane looked at Thatch questioningly. Henry Jennings. Governor Jennings, it must be. Thatch laughed. Vane turned to Jennings. What does he mean? You see, Charles, if our good captain here could deliver all our signatures on the pardon, then a governorship would be in order for our hero, Henry Jennings. Vane looked between the two men, Thatch with a big grin and Jennings wearing his scowl. Well, maybe I want to be governor of some place too, Vane said. You? Jennings narrowed his eyes with a look of disdain. We have not a prayer for it now, or any of it. Jennings pointed a finger at Thatch. You went and got us all stuck here, where we don't belong, when we don't belong. I don't know if you're in league with some sort of witch or gypsy, or the goddamn devil himself, but this is your doing. Thatch continued to be amused. My doing? You give me credit for moving time, Henry? Oh, I have cheated death once or twice, turned the tide of battle that other men would surely have lost, done things that would give most men nightmares, but this? I have no claim on this magic, but as I'm still alive, and if this is all real and not some opium dream, then I'm going to live as I did before, free, answering to no one, and with fire and passion. Thatch spotted the blonde, pretty waiter girl and caught her eye. Now, if I am to believe the date on the calendar, then it has been over 150 years since I've been with a woman. You may be used to such things, Jennings, but that's much too long for me. Thatch stood up, and Vane watched him approach the girl and quickly engage her in conversation. She smiled and put her arm around him. Vane followed them with his eyes as they climbed the stairs, entered a room, and closed the door behind them.
Poor Jack Rackham. How could he have known that he was going up against one of the most notorious gunslingers of all time? On my website, you can find links to the ebook of Pirates of the Wild West, as well as physical books that you can have signed. There's also the second book, Pirates of World War II, the continuation of this that you can find there, as well as other writings that I have done. If you're a fan of pirates and you'd like to subscribe to the Pirate Republic, you can get the Pirate Republic newsletter every week in your email box at thepiraterepublic.com. You can also toss a few doubloons our way by joining our Patreon at Patreon, the Pirate Republic. We'll see you next week. Till then, fair winds and keep a weathered eye.